take your book and put it up in the right-hand corner of your desk. That will signal to me that you can't do the work or you're feeling uncomfortable with the work, and I will get to you as quickly as possible. Now that was in my class. Somebody else's class may have a different signal, but there's going to be a break system worked into this class. This kid is going to have some signal to indicate, I need help, I need a break, I need something changed, and every teacher has to do that. It may not look exactly the same. Now, if the kid has really cognitive impairments, lots of issues going on, I probably want it to be the same. If, on the other hand, it's not, then it can be different. So again, it's got to work out of what the kid's doing, not out of what the teacher's willing to do. If somebody's got to switch, guess who has to be?
I wanted to address Kathy's comments about, I've had 22-year-old dinosaurs and 55-year-old dinosaurs when it comes to behavior interventions. I've done a training with 80 certified staff in the room, and I had a teacher say, why would I want to give, and this is a middle school teacher who teaches math, not students, why would I want to give him a mint for doing what I already expect everybody in the classroom to do? And the question I asked her in a smaller setting was, do you differentiate your academic instruction? She goes, well, absolutely, because not everybody learns the same. I said, then why can't, or do you think it would be important then to differentiate your behavioral instruction? And then she kind of was like a little light bulb for it, but it goes back to just trying to find out what's their function of their behavior. Is really doing a mini FBA with the teachers, figuring out what it is that they're afraid of.
Yeah.
And that really just switched her thinking from trying to control my classroom to trying to influence my classroom, the behaviors in my classroom.
I have found throughout the years that anything I do with kids is not a lick of difference in what I do with staff. All right? If I'm trying to change staff behavior, I've got to use the same strategies, the same ideas, the same beliefs, that I do with kids. Okay? So often I want to look at the function. Well, this is, it might not be a 22-year-old dinosaur. It may be a situation. I've got the interesting experience that my daughter is a first-year, third-grade teacher this year. And she's done it. She went to school in North Carolina, so she's teaching where she got her student teaching. So unfortunately, she's not close by. But she'll call up, and one night it'll be like on cloud nine. God, everything is wonderful. I love teaching. The next day it's like, I don't want to teach ever again. I hate this job. And some of it's because she's got some pretty challenging kids. But one of the things that just comes painfully clear to me is that she does not have the skill set. It's not desire that's the problem. She doesn't have the ability to keep all the balls in the air to do the kinds of things that's going to allow her to have the diversified kind of instructional classroom that will make that particular group of kids be successful. She's going to struggle, And I can't do anything. I can't wave a magic wand and give her a skill set. Part of that's an issue of that. How do we begin to develop that? And so, are we developing a behavior intervention plan for teachers? Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's kind of cool about this is if you can get your administration to do it, is don't even apologize for it. You just go right out and say, this is, this may not feel real comfortable to you because we're going to look at you. We're going to look at what you're doing. Now we're not looking to fix the blame. We're looking to fix the problem. When we identify there are things you are doing that are making your life and this kid's life more difficult, we are going to try to change that so that your life is better and their life is better. Will it require work? Yeah, because anytime you change, it's work. All right, but we'll put some support in. Okay.
Question about, we were talking about the phrase staff may want to consider being very vague, and I'm wondering though, because kids come in and they're different kids on Monday than they were on Tuesday. If he comes in on Monday and the behaviors are coming out of him being like feeling silly and impulsive, I might want to react one way because I know that this reaction works. It calms him, it gets him on target. If he comes in the next day, he's gotten in trouble at home, he's gotten in trouble on the bus, he's now mad. He's a different kid than he was the day before, and my approach is probably going to need to be tailored to that. Okay. So how do you build that sort of flexibility based on the teacher's best judgment of knowing this child and what works in certain situations but not in others? How do you build in that being able to adjust the salt at the end of the recipe to know if you need it or not? And
one of the dilemmas of having written policies and different kinds of things is that it becomes a challenge. I mean, the more flexible you need to be, what does that mean for what you've got to write? You've got to write more, okay? If you are telling me that I can observe, what's your first name?
Damien.
Damon?
Damien.
Damien. I can observe Damien, and if he is doing it this way, this is the best result. If he's doing it this way, I do this and the best result. Guess what your behavior intervention plan better look like? You better be somehow helping me understand what those differences are so I know if I'm going to approach Damien, what intervention I better take. Because if you can clarify that, that's giving me a heck of a lot of information. All right? But now I'm going to have to spell it out. I can't just say, oh, use your best judgment. Okay? Because what I've just done now is I've said there's really no plan. Because anything you do now is okay. Because what? Well, has anybody here not used your best judgment? Have you ever been in a situation and gone, you know, well, I really think this is the best way to do it, but I really don't like this kid. Right? I think I'm going to do it this way. Why? Because that's going to make his life miserable. Most of us want to do the best job we possibly can. We don't go in there and screw up intentionally. So everybody does the best job they can. The problem is that some people aren't nearly as aware as others. One of the reasons I have a behavior plan is because this kid has not responded to what typically is happening, and we need to spell something out. If he's responding to what's typically happening, he doesn't need a behavior plan, does he? It's not happening. That's why it's got to be clear. But if all of a sudden you've got, and there are kids like that. There are kids who give off signals. And there are teachers who are incredibly good at picking up the signals. All of a sudden, I see already that Amy is starting to struggle. I can just see that the first thing that happens is she starts to squirm just a little bit. All right, she starts to look around. She's watching other people going on. That's telling me right now that this work is something she's not comfortable with. I'm good at picking that up. All right, Laura, who's her other teacher, doesn't see that at all. She is so busy just trying to get the lesson out that she isn't able to tune into Amy right now. Helping her realize these are things we want to look at and catch this stuff. And they talk a little bit about that in this plan, don't they? They give situations about agitation, that you want to become aware of that. So this is a kid who evidently gives off some signals. Let's talk about those so people can pick them up. That's good. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry, and it's a little bit
Don't be sorry for
off your topic. What do you do? You're talking right now about changing kind of teachers' behavior or not. Or, what do you do when the antecedents are from home in the morning? How do you write a behavior plan that, you know, if this child's pajamas is being stolen every morning, and he comes into school upset continuously 3 times a week and starts upsetting the other children, how do you write a behavior plan for what happens before your class?
Well, again, it depends on what the situation is. In some cases, I might have enough connection. Let's say that it's a student who's in a residential program or in a foster home, and maybe I can work with the family and the parents, or the family, the kids' parents, to say, are there things we can do that seems to be the problem? All right. If so, it's not necessarily part of the behavior plan. Again, that's just part of natural discussion with what's going on. This seems to be carrying over. Can we do something? I'm going to help you out. In most cases, what tends to happen, well, let me ask you guys, what tends to happen to you guys when you see this kind of situation go on? So a kid is bringing stuff in. What do you have to do?
Catch the kid first thing in the morning, have them talk about it, draw about it, play in the sand, do some sort of activity to get that out before the day starts.
In most cases, that's going to be part of the plan. I'm going to realize that this is stuff that I really cannot change out there.
What's happening on the bus first?
Okay. Well, now that's a whole different issue. You know, now depending on who owns the bus, okay? Because if it's a school, because you're responsible for bus, because you're responsible for transportation. So I may have to have somebody ride the bus to see what's going on the bus, you know, and actually do part of the FBA on the bus, because that is part of the school's issue. All right. And we've got kids who, quite frankly, can't ride the bus. They really can't do that kind of situation. One of the accommodations is that, you know, until we get them some more skills that we're going to work on, probably the bus isn't going to work. We've got kids who are tactically defensive. The bus is crowded. We've got kids who can't stand a 45-minute bus ride, and that's what this is going to take. You know, and so those would change those kinds of things. In other cases, it might be that I can actually have, he gets off the bus, I know he's going to be agitated, we're going to bring him in here, we're going to help him process it, we're going to talk about what's going on, we're going to give him some chance to get together, and then we'll move him into the situation. And that will work? All right.
Comes to another problem of asking bus drivers to help out with intervention. Which, you know, of course, then it's like, we're not trained for that.
They don't sign, they can't communicate with the kids.
Right. Certainly becomes an extended problem for teachers who are less than cooperative.
And frankly, most situations, there will not be a high expectation that the bus driver has to do anything besides drive that bus.
Yeah, right.
Most people will say that is, in fact, his first, foremost, or her first and foremost job, and they are not responsible for managing the kid's behavior on the bus. If a kid is on that bus that needs that, guess what, district? Provide somebody to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, they do that in our district. They say you have to have a bus with them.
Yeah. And I mean, it is not, now, it is reasonable in some cases to have the bus driver not become part of the problem. Okay? We do not want you turning around and swearing at children. We do not want you, that's reasonable. It is not reasonable that they will carry out the behavior intervention plan. Okay? Now and then you'll get a bus driver who's willing to do something. Like, if the kid had a good ride, I'm going to, I'll give him a sticker on the way out of the bus and it means something great in terms of what's going on. But generally, you're not going to get much empathy or support on anybody's part if you think that you're going to have the bus driver do the intervention plan.
It just kind of resonates with this whole bus issue, which I think a lot of us probably have had some familiarity with. Because you don't have bus aides who are fluent in sign language. There may be a very hostile conversation going on between two students, and they would never know that.
Right.
And I've been in situations where I've got kids who every single problem behavior is occurring in an unsupervised setting. So then I've been told you can't write an FBA or BIP for that. By some people, I'm not saying I've learned that here, but I have been told that because if it's all occurring in unsupervised settings outside of school, well, I'm still so responsible, like the bus before and after. How do you collect data on that other than anecdotal? How do you intervene? Who becomes the implementary plan? It gets very, very difficult. And some of the most difficult kids, I don't want to say sneaky, but the kids who have learned when the problematic behavior will do it primarily in unsupervised settings.
That's my situation right there.
Fix that and I'm all right? Fix that and life is good. Are you guys responsible for unsupervised settings?
Yes.
Absolutely. It's on the bus. It is your problem. Okay? Short of that this child is on a city bus because he lives close enough that you don't require busing, you're not mandated to do busing, somehow this is not a transportation issue of yours because he doesn't require it. If the city bus is part of what you use as your system and it happens in the city bus, guess what? You're also responsible for the city bus. All right? If that's part of the transportation. If he's in the lunchroom, if he's in the stairwell, your problem. Absolutely you have to mandate that, or you have to deal with that. Now, part of the intervention is, again, kind of two-pronged, right? In some cases, what might be the context issues here? Yeah, we need to start making the unstructured times not quite so unstructured. What's the other thing you might want to be doing?
Taking away the unstructured time.
Okay, taking it away. Okay, so the two of you can't do recess well. Therefore, you don't get recess.
Structure the unstructured time.
Okay, you could structure the unstructured time. Okay, and I may have to start teaching the children how to deal with unstructured time. There's a skill set here that they're not displaying. In some cases, it might be social problem solving. Part of what I'm going to have to look at is what's going on in this situation. Again, what are the problems? We follow a lot of kids. Is this picking up, by the way, in the sound?
Yeah.
It's picking up. Okay, good. We have a lot of kids who we go in and we watch what's going on, and they want to join a group. So it's playtime. I want to join the three of you. All right? You're happy as clams just playing your own game. You really don't want me to be part of the group. Okay? And I don't have the skill set of know how to get in there or even to read the fact that they don't want me in the first place. If I really were looking at social skills issues, and this is one of those big problems, this is a huge problem area in terms of situations like, for example, children with hearing impairments and things, because although we're getting a little bit better there, not great, is that there's enough suggestions to say the kinds of things that children with certain disabilities do to become socially successful are not the same things typical kids do to become socially successful or to solve social problems. Yet most social skill programs are trying to teach kids with disabilities to act like kids without disabilities. In some cases, we're starting to get more research to say, let's look at what kids do that have these problems, that are successful, and let's identify those skills and teach those to other kids who have that same disability. Because in some cases, the fact that this kid can't speak like everybody else, that has to do things like tap if he wants attention, makes him look a little weird in front of everybody else. And especially as I start getting a little bit older, I don't know if I can afford to have that in my social sphere. I'm touchy enough as it is in terms of my acceptability. All right, so how do I begin to deal with some of those kinds of things? So we may have to actually start teaching some skills that we haven't taught before. But you get a lot of people doing the same kind of thing, and this is, I think I talked about this last time I was here, but it's that punishment mentality. It's like if the two of you didn't get along at recess, we take you away from recess. Now that would be like my saying if you made a reading error, if I came up and said, no, that is not how we decode, young lady. You are done reading today. Okay? You will get this back when you can read. All right? Now, you would never do that for a reading error, would you? Why? They never learn. If a kid is having a social skills problem, taking them out of the social situation isn't the answer. Putting them in it's the answer, but putting them in with a way to learn the skills. Okay? In some of your schools, secondary school, your school, I'm a kid. I have a social problem. He calls me a name. I pop him one. What's going to happen to me? Okay, I'm suspended. Let's say that we don't want to do suspension. Where might I be?
Attention.
The kid that called you a name is not going to call you a name again because you popped him.
Yeah, well, yeah, it might be if I pop him hard enough, especially, right?
He learned how to deal with the anxiety and stress that was caused by the other kid.
So I got a pretty effective strategy here, don't I? All right. What's wrong with my strategy?
That's socially
Well, it
acceptable.
is. What's going to be the problem? Yeah, you guys don't like it, right? And so all of a sudden you're going to get me in trouble. Now let's say we don't go to an out-of-school suspension, because out-of-school is even crazier, right? Let's give them time off for bad behavior.
Yeah.
All right? Let's say we do an in-school suspension. What do I do in in-school suspension?
Nothing.
I go down, sit down. Other kids that are bad, right? Yeah, all my buddies. What did you do? Yeah, she is a bitch. Okay, all right. Yeah, let's. And we're having a great time. Is there anything I'm engaged in here that's going to help me learn how to handle anger management or deal with the problems? No. Okay. Again, we wouldn't dream of doing that for a reading error. Right? It almost always includes instruction in the intervention. What we've got to do is think of the same kind of thing when you are developing your plans. Always ask yourself, if there is a skill deficit here, where is the skill coming from? If in your plan you don't have some place in there where there is a skill instruction piece going, you've missed the boat. Okay? This isn't going to come miraculously because now you've punished me 15 times. I don't know how to do this. Where am I going to learn it? Okay. All right, let's keep going here. We tried to talk about consistent. We got some. How about is the context dealt with? We feel good about the context here? Did they address some context things?
I mean, like weird.
And this one, what do you guys think?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay, they're going to do social stories. They're going to give him pre-correction. They're going to give him choice.
Gonna give them rewards. Edible rewards.
Signing for the family. Have they dealt with some of the context things? What do you think? Actually, I think they did a pretty good job of hitting some of the key They weren't clear about how they're going to do it, but they indicate that there are some issues that have to change in the context. That this kid needs to have the family be able to sign. Right? He can't understand what's going on. This is a kid who probably needs to have what we expect of him spelled out more clearly. He needs to have some breaks worked in. We're going to do some things that's going to make this context more responsive to the child's needs. All right? We're going to teach him some skills. All right? Short and long-term strategies? What do you think? What do you guys think?
They referred out.
Okay, they're trying to get some help outside with somebody up and outside.
So that could be more long-term.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of vague in terms of some of these situations. Any plan to monitor? Yeah.
They did a really good job in the short-term strategies or interventions. They talked about, they identified a problem that when the child is engaged in something and is agitated, he can't look at the person who's speaking to him. But if you sign to him right away and go through the signing process, he'll be more able to be control himself. I think that's a really good short-term strategy that of dealing with this crisis as it's starting to evolve, as opposed to aggravating the crisis.
Right.
Which is what often happens when working at least with deaf kids.
Right.
You have a staff that's sitting there yelling at the kid's looking at him like, what? And then they go, oh, I need to sign, and then they start signing, and then the kids start to pay attention.
Okay. All right. Other comments? All right. What does it say about monitoring?
Please, to give them a choice. F says they're encouraged to continue taking data. It doesn't say they have to. And then it says it's important if they, when they're utilizing the strategies to see if they're effective. Well, if they choose not to use the strategy, why didn't they take data on it to begin with?
Okay. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff here where we do, this is a very nice behavior specialist. I don't want to tell you you have to do anything. Obviously they want it, but there's not a real clear kind of thing going on. All right. What last issue in terms of support for the staff? Is that talked about in here? No. Okay. All right. Questions, comments, real quick? Yes.
On ours, on our BIP, we usually put down the goal behavior, operationally defined, of what we want the behavior to look like to say that this plan is successful. I don't see that fitting in on there. And the reason we do that is because too many times we've seen people put will not yell out, will not do this, will not do that as their goal behavior, and then the kids just replace it with another misbehavior.
Right.
So does that kind of fit in here?
Yeah, whether you know it or not, when you develop a behavior intervention plan and you identify what the alternative behavior is, you have developed another goal for the IEP. And so it is good for you to place that in IEP format. In many cases, people will actually take it over and put it on the goal sheet because it is a goal. And quite frankly, schools have gotten in trouble of not reporting on it as frequently as they do give feedback on other goals. And it's expected.
And isn't
It's expected.
And isn't your present level of performance for your goals isn't it the target behavior in terms of frequency, duration, and intensity?
You might use that. It depends what your goal is. If my goal is actually I want to develop I may have, again, 2 behavior intervention plans. I may have 2 goals. One is to reduce this, the other is to increase this. So I might be giving baseline on both. This is what bad behavior is, this is what the current good behavior is. I want to increase this one, decrease this one. All right? Okay. One last question, we'll break for lunch.
What do you do if you've inherited a really not so good behavior plan? And suddenly it's a student that you're not working with. But you're working with a team that was using that previous plan, and so you're going to be coming in looking like you're, the person who's got all these great ideas and suggestions. How do you manage that?
Person skills 101. Part of the issue that you may have to be able, informally, is to talk with the staff about what might be challenging about this plan. In some cases, one of the nice things is that oftentimes they're not being implemented very well, and what you might be able to do is say, well, we're not really implementing it, and part of it might be that this doesn't really cover us the way we need to as 5 of us.
How about if you say, I got this great checklist to the training, let's go through the plan and see if that's working. That takes it off of you when you're just using this checklist.
There you go. Okay, let's break for lunch, because I know you guys are hungry. I understand lunch is through here.
Hi. Now, where was the checklist? Where is the checklist? It was at the back.
I'm in a workshop. We're just breaking for lunch, so I wasn't able to answer the phones. What's going on?
Turns. Everything is about as clear as mud? We getting there? Any questions? All right, before we move on here, what I'm going to ask you to do is just at your table with your little group real quickly, take the one that says Building Support Committee Request for Consultation. Looks like this one. There's a behavior contract on the back. At your table, just very, very quickly, run through that one and see what you come up with as far as strengths, concerns, based on the sheet. Then we're going to switch gears and go into looking at some data and some etiquette. So this one says, I hope you guys have this one. Do you have this one? Yeah. Okay. It says building requests or building support committee request for consultation. Student is blacked out, school is blacked out, everything's gone, but you have some interesting information there. At the very back of it's a behavioral contract. Okay? I'm just grabbing this at random. I didn't necessarily pick this one because of anything good, bad, or indifferent. But I'd like you to do real quickly at your table, just really fast, look through it, see what you think on these things. We'll just talk about it in a few minutes. See, while you're working, he's stealing brownies. All right. Okay, then go ahead and look at it then. All right. Yeah, they're saying the same right now. I know, I was looking at that too, thinking, okay, well, maybe we had the same problems, but then... Okay, a lot of behaviors, right? Okay. Are they defined well? Okay, so they're a little bit vague, right, in terms of what's going on. We're not really sure. Like, for example, is it the homework completion? Is it the task in the classroom? You know, what does that really look like? How does one know their homework's completed? Is it not started? And we don't have a lot of information to know when is this happening, when isn't it happening, what are they really looking at here? Okay. Are there multiple sources of data? We don't know. We're not really sure exactly where the data came from or what's going on. So we don't. And again, this is really pretty common. Okay, we don't have a lot of information about where the data comes from or what they drew as their sources. How about the hypothesis?
There's no stated one, but they list in the chart one.
Okay, yeah, in the charts they have, and I suppose, again, if it's anywhere, it's everywhere. So it says what's the function. They've identified the function. On the first set of behaviors there, they've got escape on all three, right? You go to the next page, though, and all of a sudden now you've got some revenge and tangible reinforcers, and we're not, so there's a number of things going on there in terms of what's happening, but they've tried to identify some functions. We don't know how they drew that, all right? Is there... one of the choices? What's that? Is revenge one of the choices? Is revenge one of the choices? Well, that becomes an issue. There are many questions about what we should use if you a lot of people, I think we talked about this before, a lot of people talk about the fact that power and control and revenge may not be so clearly identifiable, but on other cases, for example, out of University of Colorado, NEF, some of the people talk about revenge is a meaningful consequence that people can look for, justice and revenge. It just became, so part of it depends what's going on, how you're defining it, what you're using as your data to support it, those kinds of issues.
If we're stating revenge is the function, I'd be hard-pressed to think of an appropriate replacement behavior.
Okay. Well, let's think about some things here. Let's say I've got let's put a case in mind that's probably pretty common. Let's say I've got a teacher who I think is being very disrespectful and embarrassing me as a kid. So I, in no uncertain terms, want to tell you just how I think of you. Okay? What's the function of my behavior? Okay. What would be part of what you may have to look at as part of the intervention? All right, some teacher behavior. Part of the other issue might be is what are ways this kid can deal with this? What do you do if a teacher does such and such? Okay, in fact, one of the things that we're finding is this is one of the really critical issues as schools begin to look at this from a school-wide standpoint, especially around issues of respect or disrespect, is that we oftentimes have to stop and start saying, wait a minute, we need to teach what is the appropriate behavior. And that's not a lack of behavior. That doesn't mean sit down and shut up, because that's not really a behavior. That's just no behavior. We want to teach this kid an active behavior. So what can he say or she say or do if I think you're doing something wrong?
Self-advocacy.
Okay? Yeah, so you're going to teach some skills around some of that. So it might be, could we talk about this privately? I know you think I did something, but you're kind of doing this in front of everybody. You know, it could be issues around for peer kind of situations. We've got schools that have done things like peer mediation, where we've made kids peer mediators to begin to learn how to begin to solve problems that crop up between kids that when there's wrongs.
I see those as perfectly appropriate replacement behaviors. I just wouldn't have classified those as meeting the need of revenge. So I guess I'm reluctant to put revenge as a function. You know, might define it, you know, as a need for self-esteem or,
Sure.
you know.
And again, part of it just depends. You know, it's you know, and there's all kinds of people who debate it different ways. And what you've got to do is can I explain this in a way that's meaningful? Can I have data that supports it? And does it, you know, whatever I call the function. I mean, I've got you know, people I say, you know, don't ever talk about a kid being physically aggressive. Because if I'm the parent, the last thing I want to do is sit down and have you write on my kid's paperwork that's going to follow him his entire life that he's physically aggressive. Now, I might uses inappropriate physical behaviors. It's the same thing. You know, we're going to talk about the same, pushing, shoving, biting, kicking, you know, but it's what you label it becomes a big problem. Okay, and it doesn't matter what you label it. What matters is how are you operationally defining this? Does it capture the behavior we're after? So in many cases, I always tell my, you know, the people I work with is, would you like somebody saying this about your child? No. Then why do you think they're going to like you saying it about theirs? Okay? If somebody wanted to get across to you the seriousness, the concern, the issues, how would they have to say it that would allow you to accept it? That's how you need to say it. Okay? This is somebody's kid. All right? Is there the hypothesis? Was it data triangulated? We don't know, right? Because we don't even know what the data was. They didn't say anything about that. Replacement behaviors? Any replacement behaviors identified? Okay. What not to do, and they've got a contract that kind of says, I promise I won't do it, right?
Demonstrate good sportsmanship, nice manners, and friendly behavior, but not exact.
Okay. As you read this, okay, well actually we'll get to that. So is the BIP clear and specific? I don't get a real clear sense of what I'm supposed to do as a staff member. I've got a good idea of what they've done, but I don't know what that tells me about what I'm going to do, right? What's going to be different about what I'm doing now? Is the BIP consistent with the FBA? Is what they're going to do consistent with what the kid has, what the function of the behavior has been identified? Do we know anything, for example, on escape? What is this child supposed to do when he feels the need to escape? Any sense of that come through the BIP? All right, so we don't have any plan that really addresses the nature of the problem behavior, or the function of the problem behavior. Did we talk about the context? This is the one that really gets me kind of nuts, especially when the people say the function is escape. Because if the function is escape, boy, there is absolutely nothing that's going to make much sense without dealing with the context. Because I've got to start asking myself, is the kid escaping to or from? We'll have some kids who will escape to. For example, you'll get kids who are like school phobic. Their problem with school is not necessarily school. It's that home is going to change. Mom and dad are going to get a divorce. They're going to leave. Mom's going to die. I've got to be home. All right? That's a whole other issue. Then you've got kids who want to escape from school. All right? Then the issue I've got to say is, why are they needing to escape? And what am I doing to alter that? Now that's almost always going to require some kind of a context change. Have they done anything to talk about what's going to be different, why this kid may not have to escape? No. They're going to reinforce him if he doesn't. Why do we think he might be wanting to escape? What might be some of the hypotheses that you might have as to why a kid might engage in escape behavior here?
Work's too difficult.
Work's too difficult, okay. If I say I'm going to give you 5 points, will that make the work less difficult for you? No. I might try a little harder, but if I truly can't do it, I'm probably not going to be able to sustain this. All right? So nothing. I didn't see anything going on there. How about short-term, long-term strategies? What do people think? Yes, no? Anybody care?
They've been putting some strategies that they've been using.
Yeah, they did a really nice job of telling us what they've done, but not whether it was effective in some cases or what they're going to do now. All right. Plan for monitoring and evaluation? Just the contract. How about staff support? No. Okay, so this one wouldn't necessarily fare too well. And again, this is not rare. This is kind of how these things come across, and it's no wonder that this is our Achilles heel, okay? And you really have to kind of look at this as, does this tell me as a person, when the kid does this, what am I going to do? Okay, how am I going to do this differently? All right. Now, let me stop and see what questions there are, because I want to shift gears on you a little bit, talk a little bit about some data, then we're going to look at some data, and we're going to try to think about how to actually develop a plan. Yes?
I think we could probably look at 20 of these, and what I've been noticing the last few years is that every either school or district or co-op or whatever has their own different forms, their own different style, their own different, which is okay, but I think some are better than others. I think that some tend to be very wordy or repetitive. It's the same information over and over, but in a different place. Will we ever be able to look forward to having something that's more uniform throughout the state, so that we know what to zero in on, because you show these to a lot of teachers, they're either going to skim through these, and they're not going to make a whole lot of sense, and they're time consuming. So if you have this and an IEP that's 27 pages long, that's a lot of pages, and if you're working with 70 kids in your program, that's a lot of pages.
In most, I would assume most people would say the same thing I'm going to say. I hope we never have a uniform form. Only because the problem with a functional assessment is that while I follow similar steps, what kind of data I take, what I do in terms of context, that is so dependent upon the behavior in the student, that if all of a sudden we adopted a specialized form, that would dictate what we do. And what should dictate what we do is the behavior. So in some cases, I can't take certain kinds of data. So for example, Brenda has a speech and language issue. Yesterday, Brenda brought a gun to school. Where's Brenda today? Probably at home on a 10-day suspension awaiting some kind of decision about where the heck she's going to be educated because she isn't coming back here. Now that's a change of placement. I've got to do an FBA. Will I ever be able to see Brenda in her school setting where this, no, I'll never, the time I've got to do this, I will never be able to observe her. Now I could talk to her, I could talk to her teachers, I could go see the peers, I could see the school seem to be a place that's kind of threatening, why might she bring the gun? But that's going to dictate what I have to do, and it's going to, and my BIP's going to look different than if I'm doing it with a kid who I can go in and observe an awful lot of information.
So would you suggest then that we have several different forms that we can use dependent on the situation that the kids are working with?
I think they have to be, there's a number of different kind of forms out there, and there's no shortage, unfortunately, of forms. And if you put in, functional behavioral assessment in Google, you can get to all kinds of technical assistance places that will give you different forms. I usually, if I'm working with a district on trying to identify a form, is to download a bunch of them and see which one kind of makes sense. Again, I try to stay away. A lot of times they want one that I can just check things. I try to stay away from that because what you end up doing is making the form fit the kid instead of the kid fit the form. The kid fit the form instead of the form actually fitting what you need. To look and see what you've got. Basically, what you want to make sure is that somehow you are addressing these issues on your form, because if your form doesn't direct you to do it, you tend to oversee it or to overlook doing it. And these are the things that get you in trouble in terms of due process hearings. So if your form somehow allows you to answer these questions, you're probably going to be okay. But because I don't care what data, how you took your data, what I do care is that you've got data, that you told me how you got your data, and you told me how you came to your decision based on the data that you have. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it was indirect, direct, it doesn't matter to me. But you better have 3 sources because you triangulated, or you better have done a functional analysis to show me what's going on, and you've got some sort of a way to support what you've done. Okay. Are we talking anything here about teacher sports in this particular one? No. Okay. Now, what I want to do, first of all, any other questions? I would absolutely strongly urge that you take a couple of the FBAs that you've done and sit down and go through it with the checklist. There aren't perfect FBAs out there. I mean, you're not going to ever have one that's going to say, oh, wow, these are excellent, all 5s, all the way down. Some areas are going to be better than others. But what you want to look for and say, wow, we just never addressed this. This is completely missing in ours. We don't think about this at all. Right? This is a problem area. The context is a problem area for us. We don't want to have to talk to teachers about what they're doing. So we don't look at that. Because I certainly don't have to go to a teacher and say, you're playing part of the role here. All right, so let's just pretend it doesn't happen. That should tell you something. Now, I'm going to bounce back up here just to kind of help you kind of get through a few things that are going on. Just some of this is just really quickly. I want to go through a couple of things for data collection. Many of you are familiar with antecedent response consequence forms, where you just kind of write down this happened and this happened and this happened. And it gives you a sense. What you have is kind of a running record. And you try to say, okay, from reading that, do I see anything emerging from that that might help me understand the function? And any given one will probably, almost any data source will generally tell you 2 or 3 potential data or functions. It's not likely that it's going to be, oh, well, that's clearly this and it's nothing else. Usually, well, it could be this, it could be this. And so you can say, okay, well, that's what's going on. So here, Mrs. Katz asked Michael to hang up his coat. Michael pushed Mrs. Katz, ran down the hall. Mrs. Katz had to run after Michael and restrain him. Mrs. Katz restrains Michael to keep him from running out of the school. Michael starts to cry and bites Mrs. Katz on the arm. Mrs. Katz continues to restrain Michael and to remain calm, attempting to allow Michael to relax. Michael begins to calm down, stops crying, and appears to relax. Mrs. Katz says that's better and releases Michael from the basket hold, and Michael stands up and runs out of the school building. Okay? Any idea, any functions come to mind as you look at this that you say, well, this could be what's going on. This might be going on based on this observation. Yeah.
First of all, I have a language issue with a lot of different schools where they're using the word consequences to mean interventions. And then, but in using the word consequent, it denotes a punishment.
Yeah. Consequence is just what stimulus or what action happens following the behavior. Okay? It doesn't mean good, bad, or indifferent. It's just, this response occurred immediately contingent upon this behavior, whether it was planned or not planned. That was the consequence. Because quite frankly, many of the times, the things that actually support the behavior are completely unplanned consequences. Nobody is intentionally doing anything.
For example, the wording on the first consequence line seems to me to be a consequence for the teacher, as opposed, it's saying what happened to Michael, but it's really addressing her.
It's what she did afterwards. It's that was the response to his behavior. If he ran, she had to run after him. Okay? Okay? What you're trying to do is figure out, because part of what you're looking at is not just what's internal to the kid. You're also trying to identify, are there contextual things that play a role in either initiating the behavior or keeping it going? What might be important to know that the teacher ran after Michael? What function might be important to know that? Yeah, if Michael likes attention. I worked for a residential treatment center for kids with emotional disturbance. And it was located in Princeton, Illinois. Little town of 7,000, about the center of the state, north and south. Or east and west, and pretty far north, right? But, okay. Princeton, Illinois is, a little farm community. Most of our kids came from Chicago. Right? Friday nights, there's not a lot to do in Princeton, Illinois. And so our kids would run away. And we would chase them. And we had walkie-talkies, and we would drive up and down the streets of Princeton going, on Elm Street, don't say anything, right? And somebody else would go, going down Main Street, all right, don't say anything. And it was fun for us. It was fun for the kids. When we'd find them, we'd bring them home. Finally, we decided, you know what? This really is just Friday night entertainment for everybody. And probably doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense for us to keep doing this. All right? We kind of liked it. They kind of liked it. It was a lot of fun. Okay? So knowing that we were taking off, even though it's our behavior as the consequence to their behavior, it had a lot to do with sustaining their behavior. If I'm going to change it, one of the things I got to do is stop chasing them. Right? Most of our kids were scared to death out there in the middle of the cornfields. Right? They thought the raccoons were going to eat them, so you let them alone, they'd come back. Right? You're chasing them around town, it's kind of fun. We might want to look at work. You're going to see a lot of kids who, if you look at the work that we're asking them to do, really significant for homework. You've got the one kid here with the homework. My gut level is that for many of the kids that you guys have taught in the last 2 weeks, if you'd stapled a $100,000 check onto that homework assignment, said, Mom, Dad, Johnny, anybody at home gets that done, this $100,000 is yours, no one could have earned the $100,000. This is not a kid problem. Whose problem is that? That's a teacher problem. Now, in a typical school classroom, especially a secondary education classroom, the likelihood that you can assign one homework assignment that each and every kid can go home and do effectively is ludicrous. It either has to be done such a low common denominator that it's meaningless for homework for most of the kids, or it's way above what some of the kids can do. Now, when that kid brings it back undone, that is not a kid problem. That's a staff problem. Now, part of what I've got to do if I'm looking at homework is I've got to ask, one of the questions, data I got to collect is this valid homework? Could this kid do this on a bet? That should be part of the data that I'm going to collect. If my answer to that is no, I've already know what part of the intervention's got to be.
I think in that sending the homework home, and if it's above the child level, you also have to take into account, is it going to be above the parent's level?
Right, absolutely.
Because that oftentimes, I remember my daughter would bring home this homework, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, then how do I can do it?
That's right. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that there is nobody at that house. On the other hand, I might even, is it fair to say, well, the parents should spend time working with this kid on their homework? What do you think about that?
Well, being a parent, I would say yes, but the reality is most of our students have parents that don't sign.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Hispanic parents and other cultures where there's not even English as a common language, so no.
And quite frankly, we can't force parents to do anything, can we? And you've got an awful lot of parents where, quite frankly, my kid sitting down to do homework doesn't even hit the radar. Right? That isn't, you know, there are so many other issues going on in my life right now that if that would hit the radar, I would be happy. It's not going to get there. Okay? So while I might think that's nice, I can't count on that. Okay? And so I've got to ask myself about homework, some of those things. So some of that can, so what's going on with this kid? Can't carry. Now, it's amazing how many times by looking at the work, you can see right off the bat that this is a potential for problems. Okay? I'm going to make life a little bit easier for you. I'm going to ask you to, there's two case studies in there. One is for a young man named Matthew Kane. We're going to hold that one back. And the other one, I forget what name I gave that guy. Russell. It's always a Russell. Okay, it's Russell. I want you to just turn to the work sample for Russell. I think it's the last page of that particular case study.
Yeah, what are we doing again? I'm sorry.
Right there. Find that sheet that looks like this. If I just look at that, any indication of what might be part of the problem? Yeah, this might be a kid, I mean, this is a kid who's not doing his work, who's becoming disruptive, all this kind of stuff. One of the things, we're not going to do this because of time. We will never have time to do two of these. One of the things that the function of this kid's behavior is he's trying to escape. Part of what he's trying to escape is anytime you're asking me to write. Now, you've got kids where, quite frankly, and it's not very rare that you look at what they're writing, it looks like they're writing it with their feet. Right? You can just look at this and say, I can tell this is not an easy task for this kid to put words down on paper. Okay? Now, he might be able to do you a PowerPoint presentation that would just make your socks fall off. Right? He could come up and give you a verbal presentation that would be fantastic. But you ask this kid to write, you are asking for trouble. Right? Do we take the time to look at that? If that's the problem, do we take the time to say part of the accommodations may be that he's going to have to do things besides writing as his outcome? Now, we'll oftentimes get teachers who say, well, when he's an adult, he's going to have to write. Okay? The reality of the situation is that there's an incredible number of adults out there that besides their signature write virtually nothing. Okay? And so part of what you've got, and again, if the situation is that this kid writing is a problem.
You know, that's kind of ironic that when you say that, and I'm thinking about it, and like you had mentioned earlier, the schools just want pages where there's check boxes. There's no writing required to do that, a check.
Oh yeah, we don't want to write it. That takes too much work. Right? We'll hear teachers say that. I'm trying to do all that writing. Right? You look at some of the examples of the FBAs in here. You can tell this is a person who did not want to write much, right? I want to get this done in 4 words. If I can't get it done in 4 words, we're not doing it. Okay, let's be honest. All right, I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. I just want to hit some things really fast. Scatter plot. I think I talked about this last time I was here, but I know some of you weren't here. This is the one thing I ask teachers to take data on. Basically, if I'm looking at what's going on with a kid, we've got the target behavior. So let's say I'm looking at David's talkouts or swearing or out of seat. I might ask the teacher to just keep track of it for the course of a week or so. My big data collection system as a teacher was change in my pocket. I would keep changing my pocket. If all of a sudden David did whatever the target behavior was, I'd move a coin from one pocket to the other. At the end of the period, I could pull the coins out, say, okay, David during DOL did it 9 times. What I do this for is basically to get a sense of something like this. Where is this behavior occurring and where isn't it occurring? I do this because of time. One thing we don't have a lot of in school is time. So where is the best place for me to watch this kid? What day, what time, where? And I want to watch him where he's doing it and where he's not doing it, so I can get a sense of what's going on. I do a lot, and you're going to see this next one that we're going to go through. That's why I want to hit these really very, very fast. Yes, very fast. Most of my data collection processes allow you to kind of draw a picture. Because as I sit down with a teacher, I don't want to play shell answer person. I want to sit down with the data, and we're going to sit down and we're going to look at it together. And we're going to see if it makes sense. So this is a kid where we think compliance may be a problem, similar to that first young man that we looked at here. So the teacher gives a request, make an X. The student ignored it. What did the teacher do? Well, the teacher did whatever she did, it becomes 1. 1 was no response. All right? We just keep on going. Next time the kid got a request, he complied. Teacher did no response. Next time there was a request, the kid ignored it. The teacher gave him a verbal reprimand. Request, ignore, nothing. Request, complies, nothing. Request, complies, nothing. Request, ignores, reissued the request. This time he resisted and he got a verbal reprimand. Request, complies, nothing. Request, ignores, nothing. What do we find out about that? All right. Do you think you will ever find consistency if you go in and take this kind of data with most teachers? You won't. And part of it's not because they're bad teachers. It's because they're in a pond of alligators. And I don't even remember what the hell I did last time Jill did this. I just want her to stop it. Right? And I am doing the best job I can to make this happen. But as I look at what's going on, I tend to not be particularly consistent. This kid can never predict what I'm going to do. What else is going on here? All right, if I comply, I don't get reinforced. Do you think teachers are very reinforcing for compliance? No, we expect compliance. It's a rare teacher that reinforces compliance. But if I've got a kid who is non-compliant, guess what has to happen? We better get some reinforcement for compliance going. Okay? That's not going to come naturally to this teacher.
That's not even an option.
Okay? Well, it could be. You just put 4 and you'd put reinforcement. Yeah, but whatever. But what I do is these are actually all blank when I start off. So 1, I just write what it is. 2, I'll write what it is. 3, I write what it is. So it's just however it peels out. Okay. What else is going on? Anything going good for this kid?
He has ability to request. He has ability to request.
Well, that's the teacher's making the request.
Okay.
All right, and then it's whether he's complying.
He isn't resisting it.
I only resisted basically 1 time, right? So he's pretty. This is one of those things that I'm not supposed to tell you. Any of you have husbands or significant others? All right, this is one of those male things that we're not supposed to tell you. We learned the lesson this young man learned a long time ago. When you don't want to comply, just ignore. Okay? Just pretend I didn't even hear you ask me to do it. Because the odds are you'll go do it yourself. And I get out of having to do the work. This kid's learned this. This is a pretty effective strategy for this kid. Why would he want to comply more? Life's working pretty good for this kid. If I ignore it, most of the time things go away. Okay? If you have a husband or a boyfriend or a teenager, they know this. Okay? Same kind of thing can happen. All right, and again, who's got to change first? Isn't that fun? Okay? Now again, part of what I want to do this for, so that when I sit down and share this information, we can realize that there really is no reason this kid should do anything different. He would be foolish to just change because we want him to. Same kind of thing around academic participation. Teacher gives an opportunity to respond. Okay? Student can volunteer, can be called on, can call out, can be correct, and we look at the teacher consequence. So the teacher got an opportunity, or the teacher gave the student an opportunity to respond. The kid volunteers. So, you know, it might be something like, what country won the War of 1812? He goes, I know. Right? Teacher doesn't call on him. Opportunity to respond, the kid volunteers. He doesn't wait to be called on, he calls out the answer. He's correct, the teacher does nothing. Opportunity to respond, nothing. Opportunity to respond, nothing. Opportunity to respond, he calls out, he's correct. This time he gets praised. You're right. You're absolutely right. That's a good answer. Next time he calls, opportunity to respond, nothing. Opportunity to respond, he volunteers, nothing. Opportunity to respond, nothing. Opportunity to respond, calls out, he's correct. This time he gets reprimanded. Opportunity to respond, called out, correct, and he's praised again. What's going on here? Okay, again, inconsistent, all right? I will almost guarantee you dollars to donuts. If somebody is watching you teach, you're going to see this. If you watch somebody else teach, you're going to see this. What else is happening?
He's being reinforced to call out the correct answer more than he is raising his hand.
Yeah, raising my hand doesn't make a lot of sense here, but calling out's a pretty good strategy. Now, I will almost bet you go into a classroom where a teacher says, I am having really problems with Brenda talking out. Brenda will be reinforced for talking out at least some of the time. Now, I'll use this example again. Has anybody here ever been thirsty? Put $1 in a Coke machine, push a button, and no Coke comes out? What do? You shake the machine, you bang, you're pushing all the buttons, you're trying to get a Coke, right? No Coke is coming, but you're thirsty, you're hot, you're sweaty. It's the only Coke machine in the area. Jill, have you ever put a $2 in that Coke machine? Anybody else put a $2 in that Coke machine? Sure. Put it in there, you're pushing buttons, no Coke comes out. Now what do? Now you're rocking that sucker, you're looking for a phone number to get your money back, right? Anybody here ever put a $3 in that Coke machine? No, that Coke machine is broken. All right. A little earlier this year, in early February, I was in Las Vegas doing a workshop. I had to walk through the casino to get to the conference center. And you know what amazed me? There were people there, Jill, who were putting dollars in machines, pushing buttons, and nothing was coming out. And you know what they would do? They would put another $1 in that machine. They would push a button and nothing would come out. And you know what they did? They put another $1 in that machine. Now, why are they putting dollars in that machine? Because every now and then a little something comes out. This teacher is a slot machine. Every now and then a little something comes out. And what does that do to behavior? It strengthens it. Everybody in this room, I would be willing to bet you dollars to donuts. You go back, you get somebody to collect information like this on your teaching. You are actively strengthening the very behaviors you want to get rid of. Should this kid give this behavior up? No. He would be nuts to give it up. We go into classrooms, look at, again, behavior. This is a kid who does talk out. We're not going to worry about the peers for right now. We'll just worry about the adults. Kid talks out, teacher response is verbal reprimand. Talk out, verbal reprimand. Talk out, no response. Talk out, reprimand. Talk out, reprimand. Talk out, praise or positive. What's for lunch? Hamburgers and French fries. I answer you as though it's perfectly appropriate for you to ask that. Why would I do that as a teacher? I'm trying to teach history here, and if I don't, he's going to go, what's for lunch? What's for lunch? What's for lunch? Right? Talk out, reprimand, talk out nothing, talk out positive, talk out reprimand, talk out positive, talk out nothing. Again, slot machine. We go into classrooms and we draw the whole classroom out. It is amazing how many times when we do this, here's the kid with ADHD, and here's the hamster cage. We, in each student's desk, put 5 little boxes. We look for opportunities to respond. Anytime a child gets an opportunity to respond, we put a mark. Anytime they get a verbal reprimand for behavior, they get a mark in this box. Verbal praise for academics, verbal praise for behavior, academic correction. So I come over here and I say, could you give me one cause for the start of the Civil War? Slavery is an excellent answer. Okay, so she had an opportunity to respond and praise for academic behavior, right? Could you give me one more cause for the start of the Civil War? And she says, yes, the sinking of the Lusitania. I go, no, that's the wrong war. That was World War I. Okay, so she just got an opportunity to respond and an academic correction. Okay. Would your head fall off if you didn't hold it up? Could you just sit up straight, please? What did he just get?